Narrator. Imagine a moment when your entire worldview shatters into a million jagged pieces in a mere fraction of a millisecond. You step into the very heart of your own castle, a sanctuary where every stone and every flickering candle bears the mark of your unwavering devotion, only to be met with the most ruthless scene imaginable. There, on the very bed that belonged to your sacred union, is Alpha King David, your fated mate, the king you dedicated your entire youth to support, passionately entangled with a widow. The unfamiliar, sickeningly sweet scent of a stranger intertwines with the foul stench of betrayal, rushing straight into your mind, violently crushing every ounce of faith and every sacred vow you ever held dear. If you were thrust into this abyss of agonizing betrayal, how would you react in that peak moment of despair? Will you scream? Will you break? Or will you do something so chillingly calculated that it alters the course of destiny forever? You will want to hear every single detail of this story, because what happens next is a masterclass in survival that will fundamentally change how you view your own worth. Wolf King Stories warmly welcomes you to a tale of shattered illusions and absolute awakening. If you find yourself captivated by this dark yet empowering journey, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Your encouragement is the driving force that helps us bring more of these profound, psychological deep dives to life. Now, let us step back into the shadows of that castle hallway. The vast majority of us, when violently pushed into the suffocating depths of betrayal, would let our primal instincts override our humanity. The conventional script for a fragile, tragic heroine dictates that she would burst into the room, screaming hysterically, weeping in agony, shattering everything in sight, or perhaps even blindly attacking the other woman to reclaim a love that is already rotting from the inside out. They would desperately cling to the mate bond, that inescapable biological thread of destiny in the werewolf realm, like a drowning soul to a fragile lifeline, begging for an explanation, praying it was just a moment of weakness, a mere biological accident. But Queen Lisa is cut from an entirely different cloth. What she did in that agonizing heartbeat was a pinnacle lesson in behavioral psychology and absolute emotional mastery. Not a single tear breached her eyes. Not a single scream of jealousy tore through the heavy silence of the night. Instead, there was a stillness so profound it would make your blood run cold. In the realm of psychology, a loud, explosive outburst of anger is actually a desperate plea for connection. It is a glaring signal that the victim still holds on to the naive hope that the betrayer will change, will somehow understand their profound pain. However, Lisa's extreme, ice-cold composure is the ultimate testament of a woman who has peered into the absolute limit of disrespect. When a woman falls completely silent in the face of betrayal, it is never submission. It is the exact moment when, in her mind, her partner has officially and irrevocably died. Her next moves were as decisive and sharp as a freshly honed blade. She stepped back, allowing the heavy darkness to swallow her silhouette completely, and quietly returned to her chambers. With hands that did not tremble even for a microsecond, she slid off the queen's ring, the heavy symbol of a marriage that had just been reduced to a pathetic farce, and placed it perfectly centered on the wooden table. She did not pack her gold, nor her jewels, nor the lavish silk gowns of a royal. The only items Lisa gathered were the raw necessities of survival: lethal weapons, a worn map, meager rations, and basic medical supplies. She walked out of those towering castle doors into the pitch-black night, leaving behind no tearful goodbyes, no furious letters, just a haunting void. This quiet departure carries an immensely profound psychological and philosophical truth. It is a razor-sharp declaration that betrayal is never a mere accident or a momentary slip. It is a conscious, deliberate choice. And the moment David chose his base, primal lust over unwavering loyalty, he stripped himself of the right to receive any emotion from her, not even her rage. The most devastating, flesh-tearing punishment you can inflict upon a traitor is not violence or screamed curses. It is the complete and permanent revocation of the greatest privilege they ever possessed, your presence. You do not need to lower yourself into the mud to fight over garbage. Walking away in absolute silence is the exact moment you reclaim every single ounce of your power, leaving the betrayer with an echoing, eternal emptiness that can never, ever be filled. Narrator. As the heavy castle doors closed behind her, cutting off the life she once knew, Lisa was instantly swallowed by the unforgiving embrace of the wild, beginning a grueling metamorphosis that would forge her into something unrecognizable. To understand the sheer magnitude of this undertaking, you must understand the terrifying biology of the werewolf-mate bond. It is not merely a romantic attachment, it is a neurological and spiritual tether woven into the very marrow of their bones and the deepest recesses of their primal minds. When a werewolf physically distances themselves from a fated mate who has not officially rejected them, the body initiates a horrific withdrawal process that mimics a slow, agonizing death. The lungs beg for the scent of the mate, the skin burns with the phantom memory of their touch, and the wolf within howls in a perpetual state of grief, violently clawing at the walls of the mind, demanding a return to the source of its pain. This is the physiological trap that keeps so many betrayed women chained to abusive partners, bound by the toxic illusion that enduring the disrespect is somehow more bearable than surviving the withdrawal. But out there in the freezing, merciless wilderness, Lisa chose the pain of liberation over the comfort of subjugation. For the first few weeks, she was stripped down to her absolute barest, most animalistic essence. She endured the bone-crushing agony of the bond tearing at her soul, collapsing in the snow, her body convulsing as she violently purged the biological addiction to King David. There were nights when the darkness whispered to her, tempting her to turn back, promising that if she just forgave him, the excruciating physical torture would end. Yet, her mind remained an impenetrable fortress. She utilized the wilderness not as a place to hide, but as a ruthless mirror. Stripped of her royal titles, her lavish gowns, and her identity as David's shadow, she was forced to confront the most terrifying question a person can face. Who are you when the person you built your entire universe around ceases to exist? In this brutal isolation, Lisa began to realize a profound psychological truth. For years, she had been systematically dimming her own radiant light so that David could shine brighter. She had suppressed her own alpha command, dulled her sharp intellect, and buried her strategic genius, all to fit into the conventional, non-threatening mold of a supportive Luna. The betrayal, ironically, was the ultimate catalyst for her awakening. The agonizing severing of the mate bond acted as a spiritual fire, burning away the domesticated, submissive layers of the queen and awakening the dormant, ancient predator within her blood. She stopped running from the pain and began to consume it, transforming her grief into an unparalleled, cold-blooded focus. When you stop looking at betrayal as a reflection of your own inadequacy and start viewing it as a violent ejection from a reality that was actively shrinking your potential, your entire paradigm shifts. Lisa did not just survive the wilderness, she conquered it, learning to hunt, to fight, and to thrive with a lethal grace that no castle walls could ever contain. Her solitary footprints in the snow were not those of a broken, fleeing victim, but the deliberate, heavy strides of an apex predator patiently reclaiming her rightful territory. Narrator. With the suffocating remnants of her past finally burned away in the fires of the wilderness, Lisa stepped into a new dawn not as a fragile exile, but as an unstoppable architect of her own sovereign destiny. The deep forests and forgotten territories beyond King David's borders were teeming with outcasts, rogues, and disenfranchised wolves who had been abandoned or broken by the rigid, corrupt hierarchies of traditional packs. Historically, these roaming souls were considered a dangerous, unmanageable plague, but where conventional leaders saw feral liabilities, Lisa's newly sharpened psychological acumen saw untapped, raw potential. She did not approach them with the arrogant, demanding aura of a traditional monarch, demanding blind obedience. Instead, she walked among them as a living, breathing testament to resilience. She had bled as they had bled, starved as they had starved, and most importantly, she had conquered the very demons that kept them shackled to their pasts. True leadership, as Lisa masterfully demonstrated, is never about demanding respect through a crown or a bloodline. It is about inspiring absolute devotion by showing people the dormant strength within themselves. She began to forge a new pack from the ashes of the forgotten. She trained them with ruthless efficiency, instilling a discipline that was born not from the fear of a tyrant, but from mutual survival and unwavering loyalty. This was no longer a makeshift camp of refugees. It was a rapidly expanding empire of shadows, built on the foundations of merit, strategic brilliance, and unbreakable psychological fortitude. Lisa shed the passive title of queen and became something far more terrifying and awe-inspiring, the rogue empress. Her reputation began to ripple through the supernatural underground, carried by whispers on the wind. Tales spoke of a silver-eyed female alpha whose combat skills were lethal, whose mind was a steel trap, and whose pack moved with the synchronized, deadly precision of a single, unified organism. What makes this phase of her journey so profoundly captivating is the shift in her internal emotional economy. A lesser person, driven by petty vindictiveness, would have immediately used this newfound army to march back to David's castle, desperately seeking revenge and closure. But Lisa operated on a dimension of emotional intelligence that transcended vengeance. She understood that seeking revenge is simply another way of allowing your abuser to dictate your actions. It keeps you emotionally tethered to the trauma, investing your precious energy into destroying their life instead of building your own. Lisa's silence evolved from a defensive shield into an offensive superpower. She did not care what David was doing. She did not check the borders for news of his reign. She was entirely consumed by the intoxicating, empowering process of self-actualization. She built heavily fortified settlements, established lucrative trade routes with neutral covens, and created a thriving society where wolves were judged by their loyalty and competence rather than their birthright. By completely detaching from the narrative of her betrayal, Lisa achieved the ultimate victory. She proved that the most devastating retaliation against someone who discarded you is not to make them pay, but to make them utterly irrelevant to your magnificent, soaring future. Narrator. While Lisa was busy raising a formidable empire from the dirt, the castle she had left behind was slowly rotting from the inside out, serving as a brutal case study in the consequences of narcissistic arrogance. When King David first watched the empty space where his wife used to be, his ego convinced him that her silent departure was a temporary tantrum, a mere dramatic exit of a woman who would soon come crawling back, utterly dependent on his alpha protection. He reveled in his toxic freedom, parading his new widow through the grand halls, intoxicated by the cheap, easy thrill of illicit lust. But the psychological bill for betrayal always comes due, and it demands to be paid in full, with compounding interest. The widow, it turned out, was entirely devoid of the silent, invisible labor that Lisa had tirelessly performed to keep the kingdom functioning. She possessed no diplomatic tact, no strategic foresight, and no ability to temper David's impulsive, aggressive tendencies. Within mere months, the structural integrity of the pack began to crumble. Border disputes escalated into bloody skirmishes because the diplomatic treaties Lisa had carefully negotiated were neglected. The financial reserves dwindled, and a suffocating aura of distrust infected the council. It is a profound tragedy of the human and werewolf condition that people rarely appreciate the foundational pillars of their lives until those pillars are violently removed and the roof caves in. As the kingdom deteriorated, the biological reality of the mate bond finally caught up with David. Without Lisa's presence to anchor his soul, his alpha wolf became erratic, paranoid, and consumed by an insatiable, clawing emptiness. He began to suffer from phantom pains, waking up in cold sweats, his hands reaching out into the dark for a warmth that was permanently gone. The scent of the widow, once a forbidden thrill, now triggered an overwhelming nausea, a putrid reminder of the colossal, unchangeable mistake he had made. Driven by the desperate, maddening realization of his impending ruin, David launched a massive search, mobilizing his best trackers to find the fragile, broken queen he assumed was hiding in the woods. When his scouts finally returned, trembling and pale, they did not bring back a location of a terrified exile. They brought back terrifying reports of the rogue Empress. The cognitive dissonance was almost enough to shatter David's mind. The woman he thought he had destroyed had not only survived without him, but had eclipsed his own power, reigning over a territory larger and far more formidable than his crumbling kingdom. He realized, with a sickening drop in his stomach, that Lisa had never been his dependent, he had been hers. Swallowing the last pathetic remnants of his pride, David gathered his royal guard and rode out toward the borderlands, desperate to reclaim the mate he threw away, foolishly believing that a king's apology could somehow rewind the hands of time and resurrect a love that had already been turned to ash. Narrator. The moment King David finally stood at the fortified gates of the rogue empire, expecting a grand, emotional reunion, he was met instead with the chilling realization that he was stepping into a world where he possessed absolutely no authority. When the heavy wooden gates slowly swung open, the sight before him brought his powerful alpha knees dangerously close to buckling. Lisa stood at the apex of the courtyard, flanked by hundreds of massive, battle-hardened wolves, who looked at David not as a king, but as a trespassing insect. She was no longer the soft, accommodating Luna draped in silk. She was clad in dark, functional leather and armor, her posture radiating an insurmountable, lethal calm. The silver in her eyes, which used to look at him with endless adoration, was now as cold and reflective as a winter lake. David stepped forward, his heart hammering against his ribs, his wolf whining in desperate submission at the sight of its mate. He opened his mouth, pouring out a pathetic cascade of apologies, justifications, and desperate pleas, begging her to return, promising that he had changed, offering her half his kingdom if she would just come home. Alpha King David. Lisa, please, I was blind, I was a fool, come back to me. My kingdom is nothing without you. I'll give you everything, just forgive me. Narrator. He expected her to yell. He expected her to cry. He expected her to demand groveling or to hurl insults, because any reaction would indicate that a bridge of emotion still existed between them. Instead, Lisa let his desperate words hang in the air, echoing off the stone walls until they died a miserable, pathetic death in the silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was not laced with venom. It was terrifyingly neutral, the voice of a landlord evicting a tenant who had overstayed their welcome. Empress Lisa. You are speaking to a ghost, David. The woman who loved you died on the bed you defiled. I, Empress Lisa, formally reject you as my mate, my king, and my equal. Narrator. With a slow, deliberate motion, she accessed the deepest, most primal core of her being and invoked the ancient rite of severance. The words hit the atmosphere like a shockwave. David collapsed to the dirt, screaming as the biological tether snapped, the permanent severing of the bond violently tearing through his soul, leaving him permanently hollowed out. Lisa did not flinch. She did not look down at the writhing man with pity, nor with sadistic joy. She simply turned her back and walked away, the ultimate manifestation of true freedom. This is the paramount lesson of Queen Lisa's journey. True power is not found in destroying those who hurt you, nor is it found in making them realize your worth. True power is the profound, unshakable realization that their inability to see your value does not decrease it by a single fraction. When you finally grasp that you are the architect of your own universe, the betrayals of small-minded people cease to be tragedies and become stepping stones. You stop negotiating your worth with those who are blind, and you start building empires with those who have vision. Let Lisa's silence be a roar in your own life, a reminder that your presence is a privilege, your loyalty is a crown, and the moment someone disrespects that crown, you have the absolute, sovereign right to walk away and build a kingdom of your own. The saga of Queen Lisa is a masterful exploration of trauma, metamorphosis, and the ultimate reclamation of self. Stripped of her title and discarded by the very person who was supposed to protect her, Lisa could have easily succumbed to the agonizing withdrawal of the werewolf-mate bond or the toxic cycle of revenge. Instead, she chose the brutal crucible of the wilderness, using her profound isolation not as a prison, but as an anvil upon which she forged a new, unbreakable identity. By refusing to let King David's betrayal define her, she starved the trauma of its power and redirected her energy towards self-actualization. She built the formidable rogue empire from the forgotten outcasts of society, proving that true leadership stems from resilience, merit, and emotional intelligence, rather than birthright or entitlement. When David inevitably crumbled under the weight of his own narcissistic incompetence and crawled back to her, Lisa's ultimate victory was not found in his agonizing suffering, but in her own absolute apathy. Her formal rejection was merely a biological formality. She had already severed the emotional tether long before. Lisa's journey beautifully illustrates that the most devastating response to betrayal is outgrowing the betrayer. She transformed her silent departure into a superpower, proving that when you stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's broken narrative, you possess the boundless capacity to build an empire of your own. True power is never found in seeking revenge or trying to force those who hurt you to realize what they lost. True power is the unshakable realization that another person's inability to value you does not decrease your worth by a single fraction. Betrayal is not a reflection of your inadequacy, it is an eviction from a reality that was actively restricting your true potential. When you experience disrespect, betrayal, or being undervalued, whether in a romantic relationship, a friendship, or your career, resist the desperate urge to fight for your place at a table where you are not respected. Do not waste precious time and emotional energy trying to extract closure or apologies from those who wronged you. Instead, weaponize your silence and walk away. Channel the pain of that rejection into hyper-focused self-improvement. Build your skills, invest in your mental and physical fortitude, and cultivate a community that recognizes your true value based on merit. Make your betrayers entirely irrelevant to your future by focusing solely on becoming the powerful architect of your own success. If you were in Lisa's position, would you have chosen to walk away in total silence to build your own life, or would you have felt the need to confront them one last time before leaving? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to read your perspectives and learn from one another. If you found value and inspiration in this story, please hit the subscribe button. Your support means everything and gives us the motivation to continue creating deep, empowering, and high-quality content for you.